Shabbat Shalom. So first, before I say any words, I just really want to thank Alon and Melody, who are here all the way from Jerusalem to speak. And they're not going to be speaking tonight because it became clear that I had to speak tonight. And they were incredibly gracious about that change. So I really encourage you to take their materials, to give generously, to learn more about the Jerusalem Open House. Thank you for your understanding. Second thing I want to say before I say what I want to say is we have so much to be grateful for. And just, we take it for granted all the time. And that we have homes that we know we can go back to, that we can feel safe. So that's the second thing. The third thing I want to say before I say the other things is just that the attempt to find words for what I saw, it almost feels wrong. Like there's not really words, and it's not really, I can't wrap it up in some kind of pretty package. It felt really poignant to me that we went during the week of Purim, because what we are witnessing as a world right now is actual evil. And the Purim story is about the idea that there is actual evil in the world. Not just what we often call evil, like somebody we disagree with or somebody we think is wrong. There's actual evil in the world. And we're all seeing that. You all are seeing pictures of that. I just got closer to it. And I think when we see really a great magnitude of evil, one of the first reactions is denial and shock. And we want it to not be true. And I think a couple of weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago, that was like a lot of us were just wanting this to go away, just wishing that it could just disappear. And in the Purim story, that's like the moment when Mordechai is in the gate in sackcloth and ashes, and Esther wants him to change his clothes. Like, she just wants it to disappear. I'm having feedback here if I can do something about that. But Mordechai says, when Esther says, could you please just change your clothes? He says, there's no way for you to stay out of this. I'm paraphrasing, but he says, if you do not act, you will perish. There's no way for you to stay out of this. And then her next reaction demonstrates her sense of powerlessness, and I think something that we can relate to, which is this feeling of immobility. When we see something that's that terrible, we get frozen, and we often feel powerless. And she says, I can't go to the king unless he summons me. It's not okay. I can't go to the king. There's nothing I can do. He has to summon me. He didn't summon me. I can't go. There's nothing I can do. And he says this line that's my favorite, and I think a lot of people's favorite from the Megillah, Mi yodea im le'it kazot higa'at b'malchut. Who knows? It was just for this kind of moment that you arose to your position. And this is a reminder for all of us. We may not be Queen Persia, but we have some measure of power, no matter who we are. Look at where you are and what power you have to draw upon. You are not powerless. So last Tuesday, not like this, a week ago Tuesday, I got an email from UJA saying, you're invited to go to the Ukrainian border. It was 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, this email came in, and I didn't even see it, but people were started texting me, and they gave me until 4 o'clock to decide. And I had meetings and whatever, and I had things planned. I had a wedding, and I had lots of things that I had to do, and I managed to figure out a way to both do the wedding and go on this trip. But by like 3:58 or whatever, I called them and I was like, I'm coming. And that moment took me out of that feeling of immobility and powerlessness into like, I don't even know if I can do any good, but I maybe could do a little bit of good. I am not powerless. And that's a gift. And we all have the ability to take responsibility for the moment we're in and to do whatever little thing. We are not powerless. So Esther realizes that she needs to act, but she doesn't know how. She doesn't know what to do. So she needs to marshal her forces. She needs to get a vision. She needs to see a way. So she calls for a fast for 3 days, and she asks all the people. She says, gather all the people. We all need to fast. And what I love about that is both that, like, she's not alone in it. She's getting everybody around her. Everybody has a role to play, right? We're all much more powerful when we're together. The second is that she needed time and a kind of reflective space to be able to see a way. And she proposes a banquet, ultimately. So for me, this call from UJA gave me a first glimpse of a way. We gathered here, once I got this invitation, we gathered humanitarian supplies, and oh my gosh, they poured into this place. And the airline only lets you take 3 massive suitcases, and then I found other rabbis who didn't have as much stuff, and so I managed to take 6 massive suitcases, and it was like 1/10 of what people had brought in. And it's like my being invited to this suddenly gave a lot of people here a way. And that matters. We also each brought a giant bag from this organization called Afia, which packs medical supplies in response to specific needs. And we each took a bag of medical supplies. And one of the main things I want to tell you is that when I got there and saw, I realized it really mattered. So 2 little things about that. One is that the bags that we brought from Afia, we delivered to this organization called Natan, an Israeli organization that provides medical support in places of crisis at the border. And they said to us, within 1 day, these will be in Ukrainian hospitals and medical centers. And the next day we got an email saying they have been delivered and they've arrived. So just that, like if that's all we did, that was something. And then the humanitarian supplies that many of you donated, we went to a transit center on the way between Warsaw and Lublin that was and will be again a Jewish summer camp. And they just completely turned the summer camp into a refugee center and a transit center for refugees who are trying to travel through the country to get somewhere. And we brought all of our bags there, and it turned out that, I'm often skeptical about donating things as opposed to donating money because it's harder to transport, and who knows if that's what they need and whatever else. And when we got there, it was exactly what they needed. And the shelves in Poland are bare because everybody's buying stuff for refugees. And so they actually couldn't get some of those things. And it was incredibly perfect. Like it was exactly what they needed. And they already had some of all the things we brought, but they needed more. And they said that it was getting cleared out on a regular basis. It's just the volume is so massive of the need. So I want to tell you that your collections directly mattered, and they will continue to matter. And I saw that firsthand. So the next thing I want to say is a theme in Purim is nahafochu, that the world's upside down. Things get reversed. Things that seem they're going to be one way, they flip and they become another way. And there was this very uncanny experience of being in Poland. And the last time I was in Poland was with our 11th graders, and we basically were there to see concentration camps. We basically were there to see with Warsaw Ghetto and the history of the destruction of our people in that place. And also to go to the Warsaw JCC and the Krakow JCC and to see the renewal of Jewish life in Poland, both those things. To be in Poland, and in particular to be in touch with the Jewish community there, and to see that they are a leading edge of the humanitarian response, of the aid response and the response to the refugee crisis in that country. This fledgling Jewish community that's rising from the ashes of our own destruction in that place is turning itself around on a dime, opening up all of its centers, all of its facilities, all of its organizations to take in refugees, to provide for refugees, to bring buses, and I'm going to tell you more, but to do so many things to help refugees was upside down, confusing, amazing, surprising, awesome. So I'm going to tell you some stories. So some of the groups that are doing this are JDC, it's also known as the Joint Jewish Distribution Committee, and they have built a network in Ukraine, in all the countries around Ukraine, in this entire region, and are completely putting it to use for saving lives. Project Kesher, a nonprofit organization that works specifically on supporting the Jewish community in the former Soviet Union, and is on the ground and has relationships and is doing an excellent job. And I want to say that all the Jewish organizations we talked to and met, 100% of them were, one of the first things they said was, we are a Jewish organization, we help everybody. We do not at all wonder, ask, consider whether a person is Jewish. We help everybody. HIAS, our organization that has such a history of caring for and rescuing and resettling refugees, they are on the ground, incredible network. The Warsaw and Krakow JCCs, fully mobilized. Natan, as I mentioned, the Jewish Agency, all there, saving lives. So that was incredibly impressive. And I want to tell you about some people I met. So I met a woman named Agata, who is the director of the Warsaw JCC, and Rabbi Shudrich, who's the chief rabbi of Poland. And they were in Warsaw, and they told us about how at the central train station in Warsaw, there's just a flow of people like you can't believe, like just coming through. And at any given time, they estimated there's about 6,000 people in the train station, and people are just, moving through there. And there's people sleeping on the floor, and there's people jammed together, and there's people standing in line for food, and there's people, and many of the people come with not a thing. Like they said, like there's people who come with like a plastic bag with a few possessions in it. There's people who come with a cat or a dog. People who come with nothing to drink, nothing to eat, nothing, no toiletries, no change of clothes. Also, this crisis is, the part I saw is almost all women and children, because the men stayed to fight. Some women stayed to fight, but all the men stayed to fight. And so these are families who just got torn from each other. And one of the challenges is that there are countries saying, we can take this many people, we can take that many people, but a lot of people don't want to move on because they want to stay near Ukraine, because they don't want to leave their loved ones. Something I saw was just an incredible outpouring of volunteer effort and love from the Jewish community, but from the larger Polish community. And everybody I talked to said that like, everybody they know is just like doing stuff around the clock. They're buying all the stuff off the shelves, they're showing up with food, they're making meals, they're figuring out volunteer coordination. It was really, they're taking people into their homes. Like large numbers of people are just opening their homes. It made me wonder, like, would we do that? It was pretty impressive. That said, the home hospitality, they told us, was now tapped out. And they described 3 groups of refugees that they were working with. One group were Jews who were making Aliyah, and that happened very quickly. We also met with the Sochnut, and 2,000 people had made Aliyah in 2 weeks. There were 4,000 more in the pipeline and would be within the next couple of weeks. We met several people who were like going to be getting on a plane the next day to Israel, and two people that we met with. I did Instagram stories, and I know a lot of you saw them, so I'm going to share stories that were not there. One was a woman named Olga and her daughter Sophia, who's 14. They lived near the Russian border, in Ukraine, near the Russian border. Olga said that they woke in the morning from missiles that they could see coming right near their home. And since that day, their life crumbled, is what she said. They couldn't imagine that their life would just be destroyed like that. Just like immediately, one morning they wake up, there's missiles, and that's it. They moved to a friend's house where they could stay underground because they were not safe where they were. And they went underground, and they were there for 9 days without coming out, because from the moment they went in there, the shelling didn't stop, and there was not a moment when they could go outside. Then there was a sudden break in the shelling, and they ran for it. And they started a journey from there to the border, to the Polish border. And she said it was incredibly difficult. They managed to get to the train station. At the train station, they waited for 8 hours. We've seen some of the scenes, right, of people just jammed together at the train stations. And as you've seen in the pictures, and as we experienced there, like those scenes are so much like our own people's history, right? And they got on a train. They said there were 4 or 5 people to like a seat. It took 28 hours, the train ride. Their train had a bathroom, but most trains did not. They got to a Jewish center inside the border, and a bus took them across the border. After they passed the border, they got to a huge refugee center where it felt like there were 1 million people. There was no place to even stand, to lie, to sit. It was extremely difficult to be there. From that center, a Polish family just took them in. And she said, and now we know that we are safe. She said that their city is basically gone at this point. It's flattened. There's no electricity there, there's no water there, the buildings are gone. And that when they were there, the lines to get bread were so long that people gave up on trying to get food because it was too dangerous to stand outside that long. A lot of the people that we heard from, just were very quiet in the way they spoke. It was eerie. They were clearly in shock and trauma. And just occurring to me as I'm saying all of this that you said we're not going to bring dark into the space. And I'm sorry, but that is my obligation tonight. But there's just a look of silent shock on people's faces, and they're very, very quiet. And children were quiet, like every space was packed with people was just really, really quiet. It was eerie. We went to Chachmei Lublin Yeshiva, which is right near Majdanek. If anybody has been to Majdanek, it's a death camp. And Chachmei Lublin Yeshiva, it was like one of the biggest, I think it was the biggest yeshiva in the Jewish world back when there were yeshivot in that region. And it was where Daf Yomi was invented. And there we met Agnes. And Agnes, young woman, was and will be again a dance teacher, and grew up in a Jewish summer camp in Poland, and now is working around the clock running. They turned the yeshiva, which is at a hotel, into a refugee center, and she's running it. She had to be in her 20s, and she said that in the beginning, the volunteers, the stories of the people who came were so terrible that the volunteers would just cry so much that they couldn't continue. And in time, they have enough volunteers now, but just very intense. And they talked to people who walked for 4 days and nights straight and just heard really tough things. She said now it's grown so much, their center, that they have trucks coming with supplies from Spain, France, and Austria, and they're on par with Caritas and the Red Cross. They're a site of the JDC, and she showed us the kind of basically storage of all the supplies that they're just giving out every single day. And there were boxes and boxes of shoes, adult shoes and little children's shoes, which was reminiscent of the last time I was in Poland and the different sets of shoes that I saw. But what was so intense was that this was all about life. It was such a reversal, and in that way so hopeful and beautiful and horrific. The JDC has 18 centers that they call cheseds in Ukraine. And those centers have a hotline, and anybody can call, and they've been rescuing people. They've been getting people out of places and getting people to the border. They've been shipping food in, and they've recently, from the day we spoke to them, they've just flown in 14 tons of food. They have been doing trucks of food as well, evacuations, dangerous operations, bringing people to safety, some through Moldova, some through Romania, some through Poland. And what we saw here is just, sometimes in abject crisis, people rise and people bring out their most beautiful selves. And as much as we were seeing the horror, we were also seeing the beauty. At the border, we saw people crossing on foot through there's a, area where the Ukrainian border and the Polish border, there's some space in between, that's often called a no man's land. We saw people walking across, one family at a time. The Polish soldiers were walking with them and helping them. And then we went to a humanitarian center, which was the kind of a first stop for people who crossed the border. And that was extremely intense, packed with people, feeling of desperation, people gulping down food. And then we went to a train station, which also I think for us was train stations in Poland are very intense to go to, but and to see them full of people who were without homes and fleeing violence. So I don't know if people saw on social media, but there were questions about the ethics of this trip. I don't know if people saw that, but there were people kind of saying, like, is it right to go there for you people from America to go there? You're taking food, you're taking beds. Like, is it right to do that? And I think we were all grappling with that while we were there. One of the things I would say is that UJA, before we went, had already donated $5 million to Ukraine and refugee support. And by now they've donated $8.2 million. We were there just 2 nights and we brought much needed supplies, and I did on balance feel that it was a good thing that we did. And what I can say to you is part of what made it good that we did is for me to be able to come back and say to you, give to UJA, give to JDC, give to Kesher, give to Hayas, give. I can tell you from having seen it, it matters. It actually matters. It will help people directly who need help. And the moment in the Megillah, the story in the Megillah is a very short story. And this moment, what I saw a lot of was a lot of adrenaline, a lot of people just like going to extraordinary lengths to help people. And one of the things we were all thinking was like, how does this last? How do we sustain this level of support for this many millions of people? And of course, there are 40 million people still in Ukraine. What is the future of this? And so one of the things that I want to say to us is that we need to be able to sustain this. And part of how we sustain it is through existing organizations with networks on the ground. And this is what they do. And that's why your donations matter so much. The second kind of ethical question was, why are we paying so much attention here when we haven't paid so much attention when there have been humanitarian crises in other parts of the world, in Africa or in Asia? Like, is that unethical that we are so focused on white Europeans and have not been equally focused on people of color when they have been in crisis? And what I would say is it is totally ethical to be focused on the people of Ukraine, and let us hold ourselves to that same standard for every other crisis that happens in the world. The same kind of media coverage, which has been extensive, the same kind of heart reaction, the same kind of sense that like, this is us. Let us please extend this reaction to all of the people who need it in the world. And I want to also say that as Jews, we have a particular relationship to this. Many of us, our families come from that exact place. And there are still 200,000 Jews in Ukraine. The president of Ukraine is Jewish. It is actually totally appropriate for us to care particularly about this crisis. And let us be aware when there's a next crisis somewhere else in the world of what we felt now, and challenge ourselves to have that same feeling. Finally, I feel like my remarks aren't complete unless I acknowledge that caring for refugees is downstream. And I read something actually by Bret Stephens and agreed with it. He said, before the invasion, we had the Russian invasions of Georgia, Crimea, and eastern Ukraine, the Russian carpet bombing of Aleppo, the use of exotic radioactive and chemical agents against Russian dissidents on British soil, Russian interference in US elections and massive hacks of our computer networks, the murder of Boris Nemtsov, and the blatant poisoning and imprisonment of Alexei Navalny. We have been appeasing Vladimir Putin for 22 years, and it has not availed us. So in conclusion, I want to say these points. When confronted with great evil, we tend to be immobilized at first. That's natural. It's so important to find a way to move into action. I saw firsthand that giving money and supplies, and we are a collection center, to these organizations is making a difference on the ground, a real difference in people's lives who need it and are desperate. AFIA, the group that puts together the medical supplies, they're going to have volunteer opportunities for people to pack those bags, and I will let you know about those opportunities. Please give to the organizations I mentioned and give generously and bring supplies here. Secondly, in moments like this, we see the generosity and goodness and beauty and humanity, and that is wonderful. We see right now a unity among almost all the nations of the world. We see solidarity with Ukrainians. We see people in Poland pouring out to give and welcome and volunteer. We see Jewish people in a reverse role in that place, being able to save lives in the same places where our people's lives were once taken. All of that is something. But Esther's first banquet wasn't enough. She had to hold a second banquet in order to finally confront Haman directly. and stop his evil plan. Often that happens, that our first move into action isn't enough. It's a start. It's vitally important. But we learn as we go, and we move from one to the next. We can provide care for all of the 3 million refugees who've gotten out of Ukraine alive, but there are still more than 40 million people there. And Poland could be next. We need to stop Vladimir Putin, one way or another, sooner rather than later. This is the message of Purim. Tyrants must not be ignored or appeased. They must be stopped. This always comes at great risk and often at great cost. May we find the courage to do what must be done. In the words of President Zelensky, when he was speaking to Congress, in the darkest time for our country, for the whole of Europe, I call on you to do more. You know what kind of defense systems we need. You know how much depends on the battlefield, on the ability to use aircraft, powerful, strong aviation to protect our people, our freedom, our land, aircraft that can help Ukraine, that can help Europe. And you know that they exist, and you have them, but they are on Earth, not in the Ukrainian sky. They do not defend our people. I have a dream, he said to us. These words are known to each of you today. I can say that I have a need. I need to protect our sky. I need your decision, your help, which means exactly the same you feel when you hear the words, I have a dream. And in the end, to sum it up, today it's not enough to be the leader of a nation. Today it takes to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace. Peace in your country doesn't depend anymore only on you and your people. It depends on those next to you and those who are strong. And strong doesn't mean big. Strong is brave and ready to fight for the life of one's citizens and the citizens of the world, for human rights, for freedom, for the right to live decently, and to die when your time comes, not when it's wanted by someone else. May we find, this is my words now, Esther's courage to stop tyranny, to be the leaders of peace.